There is a key, and there is a man on a dock in Southampton, England, watching a ship leave without him. He's disappointed, maybe a little bitter, and he has no idea that what's in his pocket is about to matter to the world. The ship is the Titanic. The date is April 10th, 1912. The man's name is David Blair, and he doesn't know it yet, but the key in his pocket is about to become one of the most debated objects in the history of maritime disasters. Not because it definitely sank the ship, but because it might have saved it. And that distinction, might have, is what makes this story so haunting. To understand what that key meant, you need to understand what the Titanic was, not in legend, but in reality. In 1912, the Titanic was the largest moving object ever built by human hands, nearly 270 meters long. 4 stories of dining rooms, smoking lounges, a swimming pool, a squash court. She weighed 46,000 tons, and she was, by the standards of the time, a genuine marvel of engineering. The White Star Line, the company that built her, had put enormous resources into this ship, and enormous pride. She was designed to be the finest ocean liner ever to cross the Atlantic. Fast, safe, reliable. The word unsinkable was not in White Star's official marketing. That's a myth that grew later, but the confidence was real. The ship had a double-bottomed hull, 16 watertight compartments. She could stay afloat with 4 of them flooded. That felt like enough, more than enough. So when the Titanic left Southampton on April 10th, 1912, with over 2,200 people on board, nobody was frightened. This was supposed to be a routine crossing, the maiden voyage of the greatest ship in the world. But 3 days earlier, something had happened quietly. Something that barely made the papers, that most of the passengers never knew about. A man was removed from the crew. David Blair was 37 years old, a Scottish merchant seaman with a solid career behind him. He had been appointed second officer of the Titanic, a senior position, a prestigious one. He'd sailed with the ship through her sea trials. He knew every corridor of her. Then, just days before departure, the White Star Line made a last-minute decision. Henry Wilde, the chief officer of Titanic's sister ship, the Olympic, would join the voyage. He had experience with ships of this class that Titanic's other senior officers didn't have yet. So the officers reshuffled around the new appointment, and when everything settled, there was no position left that fit Blair, so he was off the ship. He wrote about it in a postcard to his sister-in-law. The words have survived. He said, "This is a magnificent ship. I feel very disappointed I am not to make her first voyage." On April 9th, one day before the Titanic sailed, Blair packed his things and left the ship in Southampton. And somewhere in that rush, that mix of disappointment, haste, and the ordinary chaos of leaving a posting, he forgot something. He forgot to hand over a key. The brass tag on the key read, "Crow's Nest Telephone Key." The Crow's Nest is the lookout post, up near the top of the ship's foremast, the high platform where 2 lookouts would stand, scanning the ocean ahead, watching for anything in the ship's path. Now here is where the historical debate begins, and it matters because a good documentary doesn't pretend the answers are simpler than they are. The locker that Blair's key opened. Historians have argued about exactly what was inside it. Some evidence suggests it contained binoculars meant for the lookouts. Other accounts suggest the binoculars may have been stored separately, in Blair's old cabin, which was now occupied by his replacement, Second Officer Charles Lightoller. Lightoller, for his part, never mentioned being unable to open anything. What we do know verified by the official inquiries, is this. The lookouts on the night of April 14th, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, had no binoculars. They had asked for them at Southampton. They were told there were none available for this leg of the voyage. Why exactly, no one was ever able to fully explain. But the connection to Blair's missing key runs through every official account of the disaster. So put yourself in the crow's nest. April 14th, 11:39 at night. The sea is mirror calm, which sounds like a good thing, but it isn't. A rough sea would have shown white water breaking around the base of an iceberg. A flat sea shows nothing. The night is moonless. The stars are bright, but they cast no useful light on the water, and you have nothing but your own eyes. Fleet was an experienced seaman. He'd used binoculars on other ships, on the Oceanic, his previous posting. He knew the difference they made, not for spotting objects in daylight, but at night, in these conditions, binoculars gather more light. They help you see something dark, low and cold against a dark, cold sea a little sooner. We'll come back to those words soon. At 11:39 p.m, Fleet saw something. A dark shape growing directly ahead. He struck the crow's nest bell 3 times, the signal for an object directly in the ship's path, and grabbed the telephone. 6th Officer Moody answered. Fleet said, "Iceberg, right ahead." Moody replied, "Thank you," and then the bridge acted. 1st Officer William Murdoch ordered the helm hard to starboard and the engines reversed. The Titanic began to turn. But the Titanic was nearly 270 meters long and moving at 22 knots. A ship that size doesn't turn quickly. It takes time, and there wasn't enough of it. The ship's starboard side scraped along the iceberg. Below the waterline, the hull buckled. 6 of the 16 watertight compartments were breached. The ship could survive 4, not 6. The mathematics were simple and merciless. At 2:20 in the morning of April 15th, 1912, 2 hours and 40 minutes after impact, the Titanic sank. 1,503 people died. The water temperature was around -2 degrees Celsius. Most of those who entered the water were dead within minutes. Frederick Fleet survived. He got into a lifeboat, and months later, he sat before the US Senate inquiry and answered a question that had been building since the ship went down. Senator Smith asked him, "If you had binoculars that night, would you have seen the iceberg sooner?" Fleet said, "We could have seen it a bit sooner." "How much sooner?" Fleet's answer was, "Well, enough to get out of the way." Now, here is the honest part. Fleet believed that. He said it clearly. But maritime historians and experts have long debated whether he was right. 2nd Officer Lightoller, who survived the sinking, argued at the same inquiry that binoculars were for identifying objects, not spotting them, that a good lookout used his naked eye first and his glasses second. And the conditions that night, moonless, flat sea, a dark iceberg, were genuinely difficult. Some experts have concluded that even with binoculars, the outcome may not have changed. So we cannot say with certainty that David Blair's key doomed the Titanic. What we can say is that the lookouts had no binoculars, that they asked for them and were told no, that the key which may have unlocked the cabinet containing them was sitting in the pocket of a man on shore, and that the man who saw the iceberg believed, to his dying day, that it made a difference. Fleet spent the rest of his life carrying that night. He left seafaring in 1936. He sold newspapers on street corners in Southampton. He died in January 1965, the last surviving lookout from that voyage. And David Blair, the man who walked off the ship with the key, he went on to have a life of genuine courage. In 1913, the year after the Titanic, he jumped into the Atlantic Ocean from his ship to try to save a drowning man. He received the Sea Gallantry Medal and a commendation in the New York Times. He served in World War I. He earned military honours. He was, by any account, a good officer and a brave man. He held on to that key until he died. He almost never spoke about it. His daughter later donated it to the British and International Sailors Society. In 2007, 95 years after the sinking, it was sold at auction for £90,000. The auction house described it as, in their words, the key that could have saved the Titanic. The Titanic didn't sink because of one thing. It sank because of many small things stacking quietly on top of each other. Sometimes history doesn't turn on grand decisions. Sometimes it turns on something forgotten. Thank you for watching this one through. If you're the kind of person who likes knowing what really happened, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.